Okay, so here we see a piece by the New Zealand artist Nigel Brown, and this is called Human Priorities. It's from 1988, and we can see the title is reinforced here. We can also see it is actually a lino cut, and I can tell this by reading the details, but also I can see the texture created through the cuts here, where he's cut out a section and then printed it. It is a hand-tinted lino cut, and I can see because he's added the colours in here. This piece includes some common references that Nigel Brown includes in his work. This man here is in lots of pieces of Nigel Brown's work. It's what we call a motif, when the artist repeats a particular image or symbol. This man wears a singlet. It is symbolic of the farmers in New Zealand, because New Zealand is a farming country. The environment and the land is very important. You can see a couple of little hidden things that are really interesting in this artwork. You can see this little figure here, which is actually really similar to the Scream by Edvard Munch, which was an expressionist image or painting that was created many years before this piece, so that's obviously influencing him. We can see here a nuclear mushroom cloud and with a cross in it, and that is connected to one of the common themes again that Nigel Brown works on, and that is anti-nuclear. He often focuses on the environment, and we can see that through the use of the bird, which is almost like a peace dove, through the inclusion of images that are simplified ferns, which are a kind of tree that we find in New Zealand, and then also this element here, because New Zealand has been nuclear free since the 1980s. If we look at the composition of this, so now we're going to use the visual art principles and elements, principles of design and elements of art to discuss the composition. I can see that basically there are two main figures here and here. There's almost a sense of a leading line. If you look at this woman's arm from the shoulder, it leads towards the man's eyesight, and then this shape down here. So let me draw a little diagram. If this is the composition here, which is the way the artist arranges things, I can see there's a banner here, there's the woman figure here, and she reaches one arm down and one up, and it reaches to the man who's over here. This man is a common motif or repeated symbol of every man. It's supposed to stand for the normal New Zealander, just the everyday person. What's really interesting in this composition is we can see the heart down here, which is, she's almost giving it to him, and it seems like a female because of the hair and the bun up here, but we can't entirely be sure. The figures are you're a little bit unable to tell. If we look at now at this diagram, the banner here, it is like a banner. It's telling you what the artwork is about, and then these figures kind of dissect the piece in half, don't they? And then we've got these figures that are a little bit darker, and then the background is lighter. So there's an element of contrast between, let me just change the colour here, between these figures, which are coloured and darker, and this background, and then this banner. So it creates a sense of balance. So here's a darker colour, a lighter colour, and a darker colour. And you can see those spaces in the composition here. There's a few, if I look at the piece 2, now I can talk a little bit about texture. So if we look at these background bits, the artist has used a lino print for this, and I can see that in the background he's cut these lines that are a bit rough. They're almost natural or organic because they aren't clean and crisp, and even the shapes of the woman and the man, they're a bit simplified. They're not really realistic, like if we look at her face here. And that is Nigel Brown's typical style, and we call it, it's slightly simplified, and it's almost semi-abstract, isn't it? Because it's got a little element of realism, but it's not quite. Down here, this little thing here, it's a house. It's actually a traditional tribal house of the Indigenous people in New Zealand, the Māori people. In terms of where Nigel Brown is from, if we talk about his background, we can see here this map. This is New Zealand, it's in the South Pacific, and he's from a small town called Tauranga. And that's where he grew up. He went to an art school in New Zealand called Elam, School of Fine Arts, where one of his teachers was this painter called Colin McCann, who was a very famous New Zealand painter who, now this piece was painted in the 1950s, but you can see a connection, can't you, between the blocky shapes and the angular approach to the composition. And this is one of Nigel Brown's key influences. He was taught by him at art school, and one of Colin McCann's key things that he used repeatedly in his work was the idea of text, and he uses three-dimensional text here where you can see the shadow and the shape, but Nigel Brown doesn't. So, as we can see, just to sum up, we've talked a little bit about the principles and elements that we can see, like contrast and the way he's balanced his composition. We can also talk about something called leading lines and texture. We could talk about colour too. They're very earthy tones, as we can see here. And then they're contrasted, the cool colours of the greens and the purples are then contrasted with the warm colours here. So there's contrast with colour as well, and light and dark. In terms of his background, he was influenced, he's from New Zealand here, where ecology and environment are very important. We can see here, and we've got some references to the local Indigenous culture. We've got some references to expressionism here, which usually has rough, quickly drawn images which express an emotion, which we can see here. And then we also know that one of his key influences was his mentor and art lecturer at art school. Okay, so that gives you some idea of some of the ways that you can describe artworks when you are looking at it. And this is quite long. Yours don't need to be that long, but this is just a quick example so that you can understand how the background of an artist and the influences of an artist may come together to form a piece, and then how to discuss the parts of the puzzle that the artist uses to put together to create an image.